The sweet peas that we sowed back in October should hopefully be looking nice and green and ready now to be planted outside. Sweet peas are hardy down to around -5, so although we may not be past our last frost dates, we should be absolutely fine to plant these out now once they've been hardened off. So first of all, to look at hardening these off, we're really looking mostly at adding some additional wind to these because they have already experienced the different fluctuations in temperatures over the winter and also should have had plenty of light as well for them. For the next few days, it's worth popping them outside and first of all into a reasonably sheltered position, and then we're just going to increase how much wind and how much sun and how much exposure they're getting to the different elements as the time goes on. And within sort of between 3 days and a week, depending on how protected they've been. So in my polytunnel, there is plenty of wind that goes through. So these have had plenty of movement. So for me, I'd be happy with sort of 3 to 4 days of hardening these off. If within that period you have any extreme winds, then bring them back in and then start from the point that you were again, and you should just continue on until you're happy that they are hardy and they're not going to snap or they're not going to receive any shock. If you are in an area where you are still experiencing quite a lot of frosts, then it may be that you want to actually hold these off for a couple more weeks before you put them out. And there's a couple of ways in which we can help the plants to do this. So the first thing would be to add another layer of compost in the space that will be at the top of the plant now that the compost has started to shrink down, and that's going to help add a little bit more nutrition to these plants, and then also offer a liquid feed of something like seaweed, and that should just help with any yellowing or any lightening of the leaves that you may be starting to experience now as they're running out of nutrients and they are really wanting to be planted outside. So it can offer us just a little bit of time before these can go out. And even if you are planting them within the next few days, if you're worried about that, that's something that you can do as well. These plants are likely to get to sort of 6 to 8 foot tall, so you will want to make sure that the supports that you have in place are quite tall and are going to help with that sort of height as well. There are dwarf varieties, but the majority of the varieties are these very tall ones. And then when it comes to preparing the ground, we really want to incorporate a bit of organic matter. If you've previously fed the soil with some organic matter, some compost or some manure back in the winter, then that'll be absolutely fine. If you haven't done that, then it is worth digging in a little bit of manure and a little bit of compost, and not much manure at this point because we are going to be planting these very soon, or for me today. Into the beds where these are planted for us, we've added a couple of handfuls of manure with a much more ratio of compost, and then we've mixed that in together, and that's just been added to the top, and then the bed's been dug over as well. So that should offer them plenty of feed and really get them established and get their roots well in as well. For spacing, we're looking at between 6 and 12 inches apart. If you are spacing them in an area where they're not maybe going to get much wind flow, then I would put them that little bit further apart. That's just going to stop any issues with any powdery mildew. If they don't have plenty of wind going around, then once the leaves get wet, that can cause us some issues. But we're going to pop these outside now and space them out and see where they're going to go. Sweet peas have these little tendrils that they use to help them climb. However, these can wrap around the flower stems, and that stops us then having a long and straight stem. So one of the things you can do is actually remove these as the plant grows. We are going to be tying these in as they grow, so removing them isn't going to be a problem. If you don't want to tie them in and you are not worried about actually having the flowers straight for cutting, then you can absolutely leave them on. But if you want to take them off, now is a good time to do that. I've placed all of my plants where I want them, and I'm just going to be taking them out the pots and popping them in. These are quite dry. I did water them last night, but the compost isn't really holding much water now that they've got quite a bit of roots on them. So just going to pop those in and move the soil back around them. Firm them in reasonably well, and then we're going to take the little sticks out that we've previously used because we're going to tie these in a moment. If yours are leggy, you can also plant them in a little bit deeper and they will be absolutely fine. You may remember I didn't pinch mine out and they've branched pretty well, but if you have got any that haven't branched, then you can still pinch them out now. Now we want to grab ourselves some twine and tie these in just to support them as they start growing. You will need to actually tie these in regularly as they grow. We do a piece of string all the way up the arch. I'll show you that in a moment as a way to stop having to tie every little bit in, but you will need to do it regularly. So the next job is to water these in really well, and I'll be watering these now probably every other day for the next week or two depending on the temperatures. I'm avoiding watering the actual leaves themselves. That's just going to encourage issues, and I'll do that all the way along. And also it's a really quite warm day today, so that wouldn't be very good for them either. They're all watered in now and tied in, and then this is what we do with the string further up, and then they'll just be tucked in, so every sort of 4 to 6 inches. That works on our setup. You may find it works on yours as well, depending on what you're doing. Once these are established, we'll be looking at watering these maybe once a week. The first flowers that you're likely to see on these sweet peas are going to be shorter ones than we are looking for to pop into a vase. However, as the plant gets more established and as they reach the top of their supports, they'll put up more branching and then we'll get some longer stems as well. This can change as we have some sudden very hot weather or harsher weather, and you'll find that the stems are blank or the flowers fall off the top. That's absolutely fine and they should return to normal afterwards. If you haven't managed to join in with this sow along in October but you've sown some later, then you may want to wait until after the frosts to actually plant these out. It will depend on how established they are, but also what conditions they've been growing in. If they really haven't had any difference in temperatures and frost, then popping them out will possibly cause them to have a bit of a panic, and they'll be absolutely fine in their pots and for another few weeks. If you haven't managed to sow any at all, or maybe yours have failed, then you'll often find garden centres or even supermarkets at this time of the year that will be selling them, and they'll be selling many in one pot. So just very gently pull those apart and plant them every couple of inches as they are individual plants and they're smaller plants. And you'd be looking at sort of 3 to 6 inches for those because obviously we multi-sowed ours initially. The plan is to have a look at these one more time as they are starting to flower and mature, and just look at how they're doing and anything that we need to do then. If you haven't fed the ground, then you are going to be looking at feeding these weekly if you can. If you fed the ground, then I usually find that they're absolutely fine, unless it's later in the season and maybe they're struggling, and then I'd be offering some then. And as we spoke about in the last video, the ones that you've sown later, if you've sown both in October and sort of February and March time, then if you pop them onto a different support, then you're likely to have flowers later from those that won't have the issues that the earlier sowing ones may have. I'm not going to be covering these sweet peas as our weather is pretty nice, and although it's cold, they've been hardened off really well, so I'm not worried about the cold temperatures that we're expecting. So we've got sort of lows of 1 or 2, so they should be absolutely fine in that. If you have got lower temperatures and you're popping yours out, then just popping a fleece around them, and you can also do this if it suddenly becomes windy as well, and just give them a little bit of a tent basically to keep them cozy, can be really beneficial and can stop them going into shock. So hopefully your sweet peas will do really well and you'll have some absolutely stunning displays. Do share with us how yours are doing. It'll be fantastic to see all the different bunches of flowers that you've been growing throughout the year, and maybe share how many, because I know one year we got buckets and buckets full every few days. So hopefully you'll have a fantastic display.